We will. We kind of do some cold openings, cuff stuff, so we don't do the big, tell us who you are and why are you running kind of crap because I think that's boring. So we just like to have fun, but have fun with us as much as you can.
We're clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Well, hi Reagan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Brian. I'm back.
Guess who we're here
Here's the
with? We're
thing.
here with
I'm missing an
Representative
AirPod,
Cramer.
so I'm gonna have to go searching
Oh.
around my house for where one of my children took my AirPods.
I can't imagine that's the first time you've ever lost one of your headphones with your AirPods. You
Yep.
guys have
And
both you two have younger kids. My youngest is almost out of the dang house. My oldest is in college, and my youngest has just turned 17 last week, Tracy, if you can believe that.
That's crazy. No, I can't. I can't imagine that. I'm in the stage of losing headphones and everything else to children that are running away with them and dropping them in the toilet and all the other fun things.
How how do they like how do they respond to you being a state representative? Do they get, I mean, you got some of the older ones kind of they like coming to the Capitol. I know that, right? It's kind of fun seeing mom's office, but what about campaigning? How do they do they do doors with you and stuff? I know they did 2 years ago. I remember the stroller and you going.
Yeah. Yeah. So my twins are 5. They haven't gone out door knocking with me yet, although they probably still will. But it's hard for them, I think, to completely grasp it. Uh, they're watching sometimes their shows on YouTube and they're like, there's mommy's commercial, or sometimes it's not a good one. So, they'll run in and be like, mommy, we saw a bad one about you. I'm like, yeah, it's not true. Don't listen to them. It's not true. And so, it's hard for them. I think it's hard for any working mom. My youngest is 3 and, just leaving and he understands like, oh, mommy's got to go to work. And, it's hard. It's hard. I wouldn't say it's ever an easy position for any mom to be working and those are the sacrifices that we make. Right. So
I,
yeah, it's
I, def-
interesting. It's a different world.
I definitely think, and we had this conversation when we were first getting you to run a few years ago, was, if it wasn't this district where you were literally a stone's throw from the Capitol, there's no way that you could do the job as state representative and have the kids that you have. But because you're only, 15, 20 minutes from the Capitol, it allows you that ability to be able to run back and forth if you need to, from Jervis and from your home there, and then going to the Capitol, because otherwise there's no way, if you were living over here in Prineville, like if Vicky, our kids luckily well, now they're 17 and geez, he's almost 19. Isn't that crazy? But when she first ran, they were 12 and 13, almost 14. So they were at least where they could make a sandwich and put cereal in a bowl without her help. And because we're 3 hours away from the Capitol, it's just, we can't just go back and forth, and you have that luxury. Thank goodness. But we need your voice in the Capitol, because I think having young families, young moms, young dads there brings a perspective that I don't think that some of the old retired folks have that are in the Capitol.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There's no way I could do it if I lived any further away. It just would be too much of a strain on our family. But I am really fortunate that I do live pretty close. And I couldn't agree more. I think that some of the struggles that I'm dealing with as a young mom are not the same struggles that other generations had to deal with. And so it does bring a different voice and a different perspective. So um, I'm I love doing what I'm doing, and I'm very fortunate that I can that I don't have a long commute. There's no way I could do it otherwise.
I think, well, Reagan has to drive into the Capitol. He's in Albany, so it's not
35
well,
minutes basically
yeah,
door to door.
it's still that gets a little tough sometimes too for you. 35 minutes is start getting on the outer edges of that ability, especially if something happens. That's always the biggest thing. It's not you can plan, but it's like
Yeah.
all of a sudden you get a call from the babysitter that your kid's throwing up. Like, what are you gonna do, right? I mean, you
35
gotta get in the
minutes now.
car
Yeah,
and go.
exactly.
So
Yeah. I think too, because like a lot of the legislature, most of those committees start at 8. And that's just like a total nightmare for me. I mean, like, we're putting aside the fact that I'm not a morning person. We're just going beyond that. Okay. That is rough. Um, I hate 8 a.m. committees. I know a lot of people who aren't morning people hate the 8 a.m. committees. So,
Yeah.
just it's so interesting too because the legislature, they're like, oh, we never have enough time to do all this stuff. And it's like, no, that is not the reason. They just spend the first few months dinking around, letting all the interest groups that helped fund them, helped win their campaigns, go appear with their stuff. And then slowly throughout the session, they decide what lives and dies, right? I think that there are some, and it's really based on the chair. Does the chair run a good process in their committee, or do they run a bad process? And that like totally dictates. And it's crazy to me how you can have the chair of a committee, just like judiciary is a good example. Floyd Przanski has killed so much good stuff in the law enforcement arena just because he's been there for so long. He's so powerful. Like one guy gets to decide all of the judiciary policy for the state of Oregon for like 10 to 15 years, basically. And the only time he didn't get to is when they basically forced it through other committees, or there was a time we walked out and we were able to get the statute of limitations on rape extended as part of that. And that just bypassed Przanski completely because it was something he didn't want to do. So it's crazy the amount of power they hold, and the balance is what's really necessary. And I think that's why, I mean, your district is basically one of the most important districts in the state because, well, one, it entertains me that we don't have any majority minority districts in Oregon, but this is the closest, I think, if I remember correctly, to being majority minority. It's like very close numbers. And Democrats hate that a Republican represents that. That it drives them crazy. And so almost no matter the numbers, they're going to continue to go after it, even though, especially the Latino vote is trending against them. And I think it's going to make it so that they can't win this district ultimately, but they have to go after it because otherwise a lot of their groups will go crazy and they'll be like, but you didn't even contest the most, people of color district or whatever that, however they want to label it. Right. But I think it's awesome that you represent it and you represent it as a Republican and you represent it. We just talked about this with John Masterman. You, in a blue district, you have to look at every piece of legislation and actually make a decision about whether it's good or bad. You can't just be a rubber stamp for the Democrats. You can't just be a rubber stamp for the Republicans.
Yeah, you're spot on. I often, sometimes it's hard to be in that position because you're right.
Hmm.
You do have to be very detailed. You have to take every vote within very much scrutiny, very much a lot of consideration goes into every single vote I take. And it's but I think the last time I ran and this time as well, I've always been a part of the community and I've worked really, really hard and I've established a lot of connections and relationships and built those relationships. And I think that you see that in this district. And so, I realize the numbers and I realize sometimes they're not always in my favor when you're looking at Democrat registry or Republican registry. But at the end of the day, I think it really matters about those connections and those relationships and how hard I am willing to work and to come to the table within my community and just be a part of the conversation. And I've always done that. And I've done that the first time around and I'm doing that the second time around and I will continue to. And I think that's what you see that really shows up and pays off is the work that I'm doing and always willing to do and the conversations I'm always willing to have. So it's not always an easy position, but I'm very, very, very honored to represent this district and hopefully will continue to represent it.
well, I think you will. I think you will win. I think that there's a reason why you won last time, and I think that's why you'll continue. I mean, besides your opponent last time was pretty horrible. But outside outside of that, we don't need to talk about him anymore. But it was so funny because even OPB did that article yesterday, or whatever. It had the districts, and they wouldn't really say, but they linked to it, which was kind of funny. I found that interesting, but I think you really hit on something that is so true, is that the relationships you build as a state rep can truly move numbers. And I'm seeing that in the districts in which I think are competitive, that either we're going after Democrats or they're trying to go after us. Like, you can see where they're not, whatever they're doing isn't working, and also whatever we're trying to do isn't working. It's because you have those state representatives or their senators that are very clued into the district. They're very grounded. They go to the grocery store, they see the people, they spend time talking to the people. And I think that there's a difference there. Is it a 10-point swing? No, but it's 2, 3, 4 points. It makes a difference because those people affect 20, 30 votes each. And so I think it does matter. And I wish more of our state representatives on both sides of the aisle would take this approach that you're taking, which is just being in the community, not just representing the community, but being in the community.
Yeah, it does. It's very effective. And I mean, I was born and raised in the district, so literally born in the house I grew up in. So, I'm very grounded in it, and know the community very well. And I think that's what you see pays off. So
Do you drive I-5 home, or do you take 99 so you can go through your district? You probably take 90.
I do from the capital.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of both. A little bit of both. Depends on traffic.
So those that don't know, House District 22 goes from kind of like Northeast Salem, I would say, and just kind of works its way up through farm country and gets most of Woodburn, like Woodburn proper is in that district. And so on your committee, so you're on education for sure, right?
Yep, education,
And then
early
Ways and
childhood and
Means
human.
subcommittee. Yeah.
Yep.
And then what are you looking, instead of looking backwards? We don't need to talk about what happened last term, because I know you were definitely, like you said, very thoughtful in making a yes or a no vote. And there was a lot of legislation that came through that were very critical, tough votes. And you have to be very thoughtful, but I'm like looking forward, looking at 25, when there's a Representative Cramer that's now round 2, a little more seasoned, a little more. What are you kind of maybe thinking that you really need to work on, that's maybe either district specific or overall?
Yeah, well, I don't think that there's a shortage of things to work on. So that list can be kind of long, but I've always been an advocate for school choice. Unfortunately, that hasn't really moved in the direction that we'd like, but I still think there's some opportunity to continue to advocate for school choice and really allowing parents to make the right decisions for their kids. And I think that's still an incredible factor. I obviously have young kids myself, and something that's affecting a lot of my constituents and all of Oregonians. And advocating for parents, advocating for transparency with education and what it is that we're, our curriculum that we're actually teaching our kiddos. I would love to expand some more of the charter school opportunities. I think there's some room there to work on some more of that. I also would, I think a lot of us are paying attention to what has passed in this last short session of recriminalizing drugs and what that's really going to look like. Of course, it just took effect here in September, so we're really at the beginning stages of that. But I don't think we're done there. I think there's still some more work to fill in some gaps there. So I'm kind of looking at how that's going to play out and really paying attention to that. Those are kind of the top things that's on my mind. There's a lot of other things that are not necessarily in my committee. So those are kind of the top issues that I'm still advocating for and will continue to.
What's your position and how would you approach sort of the education funding situation? I mean, Salem Kaiser, I think, covers part of your district. Woodburn School District, you're probably familiar with their budget situation. There's all these strikes. What's sort of like your approach to dealing with that problem?
Yeah, well, I think they keep talking about what adequate funding is for education. And I look around and I meet with our superintendents and talk to school board members. And if we want to continue to tell our schools, which on the legislative side, we have put more and more and more and more responsibility on schools and school districts. If we want to do that, then we need to properly fund it, and we haven't. And I saw that in last long session with um a plethora of different bills. 819, Senate Bill 819 that passed
Hmm.
was not properly funded. And I talked to my school districts. I have my little tiny school, Jervis, and their budget has taken a significant hit because of that particular bill.
Yeah.
We also had another one, I forget the bill number, but it was unemployment for certified staff. And that has also districts have taken a huge cut in budget because of that particular bill, which no one thought was going to rack up the amount that it did. And of course, now it has, and we didn't properly fund it. So we're continuously putting so much on these school districts and we aren't funding them. And then we're not really prioritizing education. It's all these other kind of things that's going on. So, yeah, are they hurting for our money? Absolutely. I mean, that is happening because we've continued the legislature has continued to put more and more and more on their plate that has not been properly funded.
I think
Um,
that's a great point. You talk about the scope of all the things the schools have to do. The legislature is always going fishing for more data, but to collect and process and put that data into a space that the legislature and the state can actually use it is really expensive. Takes a lot of manpower typically. I think a lot of those things they don't really realize are adding to the cost of education. It's ballooning the size of admin budgets, and those admin salaries aren't typically, low salaries. I think the thing that would be interesting is if the governor's telling most of the state agencies only plan for, 1 to 2% above CSL for their budgets, which is not much money at all. I think a Republican governor would say you guys should go plan for cuts, but they would scream bloody murder. So Democrats won't do that. I think it would be nice if either the Department of Education or the governor or somebody at the legislature said, hey, you guys should start slimming down some stuff, especially these districts. Give some districts to guidance that are losing population versus gaining population. They're just going to have to budget differently going forward. And I think I'm not sure that they always get those signals until it's too late. And especially with this budget cycle, what I saw was the number that was asked for didn't account for a bunch of teacher strikes and teacher contracts that were asking for, state agencies planned, and their contract was negotiated to be 6 and 6, basically 6% cola in the first year, 6% cola in the second year. I think it was 6.5 and 6.55. They planned 3 and 3 for teachers. Well, duh. Teachers are going to look at state employees getting 6% COLAs and go, yeah, we want that. And if they had properly planned for that, I don't think you would have seen quite as many strikes. Or if you would have said, look, this is as much as we can afford to give you, but your teachers are going to ask for more money. We just don't have, I just feel like the system isn't set up to properly equip local school districts to be successful. And that's why it was so ugly this year, and it'll get uglier in districts that are seeing population declines and school closures.
yeah, it's really the amount that we're putting on school districts is it's a heavy burden. It's a really heavy lift. And I mean, I think it's a heavy lift no matter what district you're in, but I guess I see it from kind of some smaller school districts and what they're having to deal with and try to overcome. And I mean, I remember talking to one of my smaller districts superintendent, and I forget I think the ODE emails were at, like, sometimes they're in the 20s per day. That you're getting 20 emails from an agency in one day and you're a small district. It's not the only thing you have to do, right? So the lift that we're asking, and of course every single email is probably asking for some kind of data or document or something for them to do. It's not just a quick response back. So it's it's crazy to me the amount that we ask them to do, and then and a lot of times and oftentimes it's not funded. And this is my first term. So I can only imagine the decades that have gone by of, of it accumulating to where we're at now. And it's, it's really no wonder that we're seeing it where it's at, because we've just continued to pass things to tell them what to do, and not allocate the funds for it.
Isn't that the case, the unfunded mandates? I mean, everything from like light bulbs to, where some of these school districts, like you said, these smaller school districts, and they can't afford to go replace all their light bulbs, and it's expensive to go to the newer, versions of that. And I'm using that as just an example, but Senate Bill 819 is probably a great example where you forcing kids that get the same education as other kids regardless. They have to have this classroom time, but then the school district has to foot the bill for it. So how does a small school district that's barely even keeping the lights on at this point, how are they able to even be able to fund? And some of these kids are some hard cases. I mean, I know some kids around the state where they're saying it takes like 3 people with one kid all day.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's not attainable. And even we're seeing it's not even attainable in the larger districts, because now they're getting, 15, 20 of these kids, and you got to have all of these state employees to pay for it. It's just not attainable. That's where I think the school choice model makes sense. I think going to that level where everybody can choose where they want to go, and here's $14,500 or whatever voucher, take it with you, and you decide what you want to do with it. And the communities then can provide those school choice facilities and all of those things. I mean, I'm sure there's more layers to school choice than just that, but that idea that people can choose where they want their kids to go, I think is going to allow some competition, and these school districts just can't keep up with the layers that just keep coming out of the legislature. They just can't.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's I mean, I really do feel for them, and then and I know Rep McIntyre has brought this up quite a few times in the legislature, but even their grant process and writing grants. And I remember talking to a different superintendent, and he had spent so much time. It was a smaller district, so they don't have a full-time grant writer like some of the larger districts do. And not to mention, I mean, usually I think that can be upwards of a 6-figure job to get someone who knows how to write grants. And so, he was the superintendent doing it himself, and the hours that he accumulated in writing a grant, or trying to apply for a grant, was the amount. Had he broke out his salary hourly, it was the amount of the grant itself that he spent hourly putting in the work to try to get it.
Wow.
So of course, he's salary, so it doesn't exactly work that way, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous and insane. And it's all redundant. The information is all the same over and over and over again for all of these different grants. The process is not streamlined. It's not efficient. And it's, what we're asking these districts to do is just obviously not working. We see that across the state. So it's sad. It's really sad. It's pretty horrific. And even talking about Senate Bill 819, it wasn't originally, when it came to us, it had 0 funding attached to it. Mm-hmm. 0, which to us was insane. And I mean us by the Republican caucus. And eventually they did end up attaching some funds to it, but it still, was nothing close to sufficient. So it's never enough.
We had Rep McIntyre on Greg, a month and a half ago or so, and we had a long discussion. So if you guys want to hear more about education funding, go back and find that episode, because I think she, being on the school board herself and being on education committee, she is really wrapping her head around this funding issue. And I think she wants to get a task force pulled together. She's got a bill for that, which I think is I hate task forces in general, because but it's the process, right? I mean, it's just the process we have to go through to make things happen. And I think there's some Democrats out there that want to go through that process as well. I doubt your opponent would want to go through that process to bring it back to the campaign, because I think she's just an OEA shill, and we don't need more OEA in the education process. Less OEA equals better education. I'll say that. You don't have to, but I can say that. You probably agree with me, but we don't need to go there. But looks like your race is shaping up to be the most expensive house race this cycle. So already at 1.4 million between the two of you, you got $1 million of that, which is great. I mean, it's great to see the funding from our side coming through for you, and I think that's just a testament again of your character and how you've been as a state representative. There's lots of funding coming in anywhere from Walden helping you out again, and to all of the different funding groups that are out there and your other fellow members, which is what I really noticed is tons of support from your members. And I think that's also matters. So
Yes. Yeah. I've been very, very, very fortunate to have the support that I've had, and I don't take any of it for granted. I'm very appreciative of it. I realize that it's, it's all a choice on everyone's part on who they're going to give and who they're going to support. And I wish it wasn't the most expensive house race, but here we are. So yeah, it's crazy how much money has gone into it. And like I said, I don't take it lightly. I really appreciate so much support from so many people, because I obviously could not do that by myself. So
well, it's more as we've talked about before, it's more fun running as an incumbent than it is a challenger. So that part is, and Senator Anderson has enjoyed this, and working with him on the coast, and last time being a challenger, and he's like, it's a little better when you're the incumbent than it is when you're challenging for the job. So there's definitely some benefits to incumbency, and one of those is just that, right, that people tend to be more apt to want to support you and get on board, especially if you're good. I think if you're an incumbent and people are kind of hesitant about giving you funds, I think maybe you should start looking in the mirror a little bit more. So
very true. It is very true. I have luckily been able to build a lot of really great relationships, and I think that's where it comes down to is, as an incumbent, you have hopefully built some relationships and proven yourself at least a little bit, and proven that you can do the work and you're ready for it. So I think I've done all of that and more, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready for November 5th.
yeah,
We all are.
Well, we'll let you get going and get out there on the doors and go do what you need to do, or go take care of the kids, or all of the things, I'm sure, from sun up to sundown that you do every day. So appreciate your time and really spending this with us. And after the election, we'll have you back on and we can talk a little bit. Maybe we'll have you and Rep McIntyre, and we can talk more about education and how we kind of solve, maybe even get Rep Wright in here. He's got some bills coming up too on that education stuff, and he's got lots of thoughts on education.
Yes. Yeah. I would love that. Yeah. Contact me after. It is true. It's all hands on deck right now for everything, and pushing the last little bit here. What do we got? Less than 2 weeks, I think. So we're just trying to buckle down.
Thanks for being on the program, Representative, and looking forward to seeing you back in Salem next year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Bye, guys.